الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي قصرت عن رؤيته أبصار الناظرين وعجزت عن نعته أوهام الواصفين. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا وإذا خاطبهم الجاهلون قالوا سلاما والذين يبيتون لربهم سجدا وقياما. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات بيجي محمد وعلى السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. As you know, we started out the series of Majlis last night, and it was a continuation of the topic that I was discussing earlier, and that was Insan Kamil. And we mentioned these verses last night from Surah Furqan, chapter 25, verses 63 and 64 and onwards. And we were discussing as to the 14 attributes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning about this elite group of people known as Ibadur Rahman. And the first attribute that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts out, and which will help us in undertaking this concept of Insan Kamil, or being a perfect being, which is the requirement as far as what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, which is the requirement as far as Imam of our time, Imam Mahdi Ajjalallahu ta'ala Farajahu Sharif, wants from us. And one of the reasons for the delay of the zuhur of Imam could be the same, that he does not have enough people who would be true supporters of Imam. And that's a very unfortunate state if that is the case. If you look around Ahl Tashayyo, the world, which is filled with the followers of Ahl Bayt, and not only just the followers, but also those who are Muhibb Ahl Bayt, lovers and the followers alongside, yet we still see the delay in the reappearance of our Imam. And one of the reasons is obviously that up until all the signs take place, at least the signs which are definite that have to take place, up until they don't take place, Imam will not reappear. But in the meantime, it's not our duty just to sit hand on top of hand, just waiting and going by our lives in the fashion that we usually spend our days and nights, and just wait for Imam in that fashion. No, we gotta pave the path. You gotta be ready. Just the same way, I'm sure you've heard this example over and over, that if you hear your mom or your dad say to you that, we're gonna have some guests coming over tonight, and first thing they tell you is that, clean up your room, or clean up this, do this. They give you some chores inside the house, which they think that you can handle. And the mature you are, the bigger, the higher tasks you will get. Younger or less responsible you are, you will get easier tasks. So this is something which we all go through. Why are we cleaning? Why are we doing all of these things all of a sudden? Because we're waiting for someone. You don't wait for someone just sitting idle and not do anything. It will definitely be a different day in your life than in the week that you would by spending just regularly without anyone coming to your house. But the same day when there's a person coming to your house, and for that matter, if it was an important person in your life, then you would be worrying about it and you would be preparing for it even more than you would do normally. So this is a difference. Just imagine every day that your imam is going to come. And if you have that feeling that your imam is going to come at the end of the day, how would you change your lifestyle? How would you start your day? How would you end your day? What would be the anticipation? So this is something which is lacking and missing in our lives. And if it was there, and definitely if it can be there, we got to show that through our character, and we got to prove it through the actions that we perform. So what we can do in the meantime is talk about the teachings of Ahlul Bayt. As I said yesterday, when we were talking about the recognition and the proper ma'rifat of Imam of our time is what is needed. And when you say what is recognition and what does this ma'rifat mean, we hear this word a lot, yet we don't get beyond this. We just say, well, you need ma'rifat, but we don't get beyond this. What is this ma'rifat? What is this proper recognition? This proper recognition is not that ID card recognition that we were talking about. We spent some time talking about that we can't just say, I know Imam's name, and I know Imam's parents, and I know Imam's dad, and I know all of these things, and that is enough for me. No, that is something which will not be enough. Rather, you need to have this recognition that is Imam of your time. You need to believe in the wilayat and the control of the Imam, that he possesses and he has knowledge of every single thing that you and I do on our daily basis. He's actually given the accounts of our actions, on periodic basis. So he's completely aware of our actions. And so if we do something in our life which we know for sure that our parents will not allow us to do, then how can we trust that our Imam will let us do that thing? And usually I mentioned this hadith that the people who get to that level of content and rida. Rida was the word that means satisfaction and complete pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are the people about whom, when they were asked as to what they did, one of the things that they mentioned we did was we controlled our desires in privacy. It is okay to control your desire while you're sitting over here, when you're among so many people in a masjid. The tricky part is when you're by yourself, when you're alone, when you're privately somewhere where no one else can see you except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Imam is made aware of your actions. That's when it gets tricky. So it's not really a skill for anyone to behave nicely while sitting in a masjid, to be very up to guards as far as etiquettes and adab is concerned. No. This adab and etiquette should be applied when a person, when these people were asked, there was a group of people who was flying directly into the paradise. They were raised from their graves and they did not have to make any stops anywhere. And when the angels asked them, what was it that you do, that you used to do? And they replied by saying, one of the things that we did was that we safeguarded ourselves in privacy. And that was the deal. That was the key about it. And there was another thing that they did, which earned them the place in this paradise. So, last night we were talking about the two powers that exist in every human being. The two things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to us, that He has placed, the two elements. One is this aql, the second is the desires. And we gave an example of how you can analyze this with the analogy of the brakes and the accelerator that you have in your cars. These desires act as if they are the accelerator. They're telling you to go as fast as possible. And, don't worry about the consequences. But then the aql, or your intellect, or your brain, acts as the brakes in the same car, tells you to slow down. You don't need to go this fast. Be careful. You'll end up getting hurt. You'll end up falling into a ditch or whatnot. So brake acts in that form. So we see that these two are there and they have to be there together. If one of them were there, if only aql was there, then we would be considered like angels. If it was only desires there, then we would be considered like animals. The mixture of the two, aql and these desires, is what makes us insan. And when you're able to take both of these things along, here there are desires which are pushing you, and there's aql that is stopping you. This is when you can become or get to the level of perfection. Because it does not make sense for an angel to be perfect. Perfection for an angel does not make any sense. Perfection for an animal does not make any sense. Yeah, they would be perfect in their category, whatever that might be. But what makes sense for a perfection of insan is to have both of this aql and the desires in him, and to be able to bring them together. Whereas Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib ﷺ says that if the aql takes over the desires of a person, then this person is better than the angels. But if the desires are something which take over this aql, then he's worse than an animal. So you want to have this balance between this aql and desire, and in order for you to go ahead and continue. This is where we see, someone might say, well, these are two opposites of one another. Aql telling you all good, whereas desires are taking you on the other direction. This is where a philosopher such as Mullah Sadruddin Shirazi, he comes out and he says this because a lot of people were contradicting in the Quran and the sayings of Islam. And this is where he comes up and he explains this concept, that there's nothing wrong with having contradictory things even in the world that we see. So if you do see anything contradictory in the world, that is actually there. If you see this contradiction inside your jism, inside your body, where there's one is aql, the other is desire, it is completely okay. This is what he says. He says, وَلَوْ لَتَّزَادُ, if there was not these tazad or differences, مَا صَحَّ الدَّوَامُ الْفَيْزِ مِنَ الْمَبْدَأِ الْجَوَادِ. It said if there weren't contradictions and opposites in the world, continuous mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not exist. So for you to have this continuous mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these opposites have to be there. And so he goes into the explanation of it further, where we can understand it from this hadith from our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, where he gives the example of the human soul and the body as a battlefield. He says it's a battlefield. You got two different armies in there. One is the army of aql, the other one is the army of jahl. And this hadith is a lengthy hadith in which Imam counts 75 soldiers of jahl and ignorance, and he counts 75 soldiers of aql to tackle with it. So you can't say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala left this jahalat and ignorance way too much liberty or gave it way too much power. No. As far as this ignorance is concerned, as far as this desires is concerned, the same amount of force is there to tackle these forces. So both of them are there in their balance, and they're always helping us. So over here we see that according to even psychologists, that these people who, and we were talking about that these Ibadur Rahman, the first attribute that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, what does he say? Ibadur Rahman alladhina yamshawna ala al-ardi hawna. That when they walk on the earth, they are humble. They show humiliation only in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They show humbleness in front of everyone else. They're not arrogant. The first attribute of a person who's referred to as Abdullah, worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to this ayat of Surah Furqan 63, the first attribute of this perfect being is to be humble. And this is where we left off last night. We were talking about the concept of what does it mean to be humble. And obviously we see, if you want to learn something, if you want to understand something, تُعْرِفُ الْأَشْيَاء بِأَزْدَادِهَا. You learn the opposites of those things and you understand that. So if you want to know what is good, you learn what is bad, and now good makes sense to you. So you want to understand this concept of arrogance, you got to go ahead and look at the concept of being humble. You want to understand who is humble, you go ahead and study the concept of arrogance. We gave an example of the shaitan. Now there's a combination that he's ibadah, he's Abdullah as well. He was worshipping Allah. He worshipped more than any one of us would ever be able to do his worship, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when it was coupled with the arrogance of shaitan, this worship of his does not make any sense and is not worth anything. So when you see, even with this ibadat of ours, this ibadah which is the highest form of ibadah, the first performance of worship, the highest performance of worship is this salat. Even with this salat, if it's coupled with this arrogance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept it. So that is the important thing over here for us to understand, that arrogant people who do not have subtle personality, and these are the people, when they try to compensate that, they start living in imagination. So a lot of people, these arrogance, when it gets into their heart, and when they come out with this arrogance, because they want to compensate this arrogance, and they cannot survive in this society, they start living in their imagination. They start believing in things, fictionary things, and so on and so forth. Secondly, people by learning a few things. The other thing which gives arrogance to insan. So that's one part of it. Second thing that gives arrogance is by learning a few formulas of math and science and whatnot. People give liberty to themselves to go ahead and speak in all the fields that they would want to. Right away, I'm an expert in religion. I'm an expert in this, I'm an expert in this, I'm an expert in all the areas. Although the first thing that people become experts is the field of religion. Right away, if you want someone, the first thing that our communities give out for free is consultation, mashwara. They don't charge you for that either. They're ready to give you mashwara right away. You don't even want it, then they give it to you. And when it comes to a consultation and a mashwara in the field of Islam or religion, they'll be the first ones. This is how I perceive it. This is how I see it. So this leads to arrogance as well. When you don't accept what is being told to you, and then you try to persuade others in your false beliefs. So by learning a few formulas, you cannot just go ahead and claim that now you are authority in that subject. This is actually something which is very, very disturbing, because we see that was the same thing that was done with Quran as well. This book of Allah that has been given to us, there's zulm and oppression against this book. And the most amount of oppression and zulm that is done to this book is through Muslims. Yeah, if a non-Muslim does something to Quran, that's fine, because he doesn't understand it. But when a Muslim goes ahead and does zulm and oppression to this Quran, then definitely it is something which is much, much, much more severe than a non-Muslim. We are the ones who have done this injustice. Prophet, when he's leaving, he says, I leave behind you two weighty things. One is this Quran, the other one is Ahlul Bayt. You've heard this hadith many times. Inni tarikum fikum thaqalain. Two things. He did not say one. What happened, one group took Quran with them, and right after the death of the Prophet, not even 70 days, right away, after the event that had taken place of Ghadir Khum, right after that 70 days, Prophet's wafat takes place, and a person right around that time says, Hasbuna Kitabullah, Book of Allah is enough for us. If today someone says that to you, Book of Allah is enough for us, and I'm sure you will come across people who do say that, you just go ahead and ask them a simple question. He said, do you pray 5 times a day? And when they say, yes, we do pray 5 times a day. He said, if Book of Allah is enough for you, go ahead and prove to me the method of performance of salat from Quran. You cannot prove the way you pray today through Quran. That is the biggest ibadat that we do, salat. Yet nowhere does Quran say, you have to do takbiratul ihram, you have to make the niyat, you have to read surah Fatiha, you have to read another surah, you have to go into ruku, then you have to get up, do qiyam, then you go into the sajda, then you sit up again, and also on. Every single Muslim knows that. Every single child growing up in the Muslim family sees his or her parents doing it, knows that. Ask these people a question. If Book of Allah was enough, how do you know how to pray? You will not be able to prove how to pray. So you need something else along with this Book of Allah to explain to you how do you go ahead and perform these ibadat. And this is where Ahlul Bayt comes in, where Prophet said, Inni tarikum fikum al-thaqalain. I'm leaving behind you two weighty things. One is this Quran and the other one is Ahlul Bayt. Salawat bheji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. But because of this arrogance, we see the Muslims, there's this problem in it. I'll very briefly explain this concept of the oppression that we have done, and I have to talk about ibadat as well tonight. So hopefully you'll bear with me. I'll take full time that I'm allotted, 1 hour, and if I even go beyond a couple of minutes, hopefully it's a Saturday night. I'm sure there's nothing more better than being at a Majlis and commemorating the gham of Syed al-Shuhada. Salawat bheji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So we see that Muslims are the first as far as doing injustice to Quran is concerned. 3 examples of it. 1, some did injustice to Quran by interpreting it according to their own understanding. The thing that I was mentioning, first incident of arrogance is that by learning a few formulas, we give ourselves liberty to go ahead and do and say whatever we want to. So we ourselves interpreted this Quran according to our beliefs. And sometimes that had ended up being wrong because you and I do not have the proper knowledge. Just by reading the translation of Quran, you cannot go ahead and comprehend every single thing. Yeah, majority of the things will be understood with this translation, but you cannot do tafsir unless you refer to those ahadith of Ahlul Bayt. Second, by abandoning this Quran. And I'll mention what does it mean to abandon the Quran. How have we abandoned this Quran? Actually, before we get into that, let's just ask ourselves, how many of us pick up this Quran on a daily basis? We got 24 hours. Let's say we get a good night's sleep, 8 hours of sleep. If we work 9 to 5, that 8 hours of work. Or if you go to school, again, that is something 7 to 8 hours as well. The rest is the remaining 8 hours that remain, if I'm doing the math correctly. What do you do? How much time do you have in your hands, and how do you utilize it, and how much is spent on Quran? Forget about reading it, looking at it, picking it up from one shelf and putting it to another shelf. So we don't. That's what means abandoning it. But I'll go into more details of it. Third, some focusing on the verses of qital, killing, and those verses which had resemblance with other verses and mixed meanings. Some only focused on those ayat of Quran, and they ended up being in trouble as well. So these 3 things, inshallah, we will discuss. First, wrong interpretation. Second, abandonment of Quran. Third, focusing on only these ayat which talk about killing and whatnot. This is where we have done injustice to Quran. The first is, again, by misinterpretation. We see that Quran talks about zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It says that do the zikr of Allah. When you do the zikr of Allah, ala bi zikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. With the zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what happens? You get serenity of heart, you get itminan qalb, your heart is satisfied and is well pleased. That's one ayat of Quran. At another place you see ayat of Quran, it says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجَلَتْ قُلُوبُهُم. That when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His zikr is done, hearts start to tremble, they start to shake, they start getting scared. So there's this contradiction in it, right? You say one ayat of Quran is saying, with the zikr of Allah, there's itminan, there's satisfaction, there's serenity. With another place, Quran says, with the zikr of Allah, what do you get? Fear. Hearts tremble and shake. How do you combine the two? If you go and do your own tafsir of this Quran, or if you go to those people who are not worthy of doing this tafsir of Quran, then definitely you will go ahead and say, yes, there's contradiction in Quran. But if you come to Maktab Ahlul Bayt, and if you come and knocking on the door of Ahlul Bayt, alayhim salatu wassalam, they will give you a perfect reason as to why we have this sort of conflict in Quran. Remember, Mullah Sadra also said, if there was not these conflicts and contradictions, continuous mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not mean anything. And you'll understand it towards the end of it, if this sentence does not make any sense. How do you join between the two? One ayat says, with the zikr of Allah, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَتَطْمَئِنُّ قُلُوبُهُم بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. That with the zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hearts are at rest and they feel, being in the state of pleasure and at rest and serenity. At another place it says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُم. Example is very simple. And I'll give an example of young kids. That if a child who's walking down a street, I will just take this street down over here. It's a pretty, remote area. Not many people live over here. Not many, cars passing by over here. I wouldn't be walking around here at night, in this downtown area anyway, right? Let alone the kids. But if a child was walking down that road by himself, how would you feel about that child? And then if that child was walking down that road with his father. So in the first stage, you would be worried about the child, right? What is he doing on the street? But let's not worry about that. We should worry about it if we see it in a real sense, but not right now. So if a child is walking down that road, which there's no cars, there's no traffic, there's no one there, and it's dark at night, but he's holding on to his father's hand. Well, how does this child feel at that moment? He feels secured. He feels itminan. He feels complete, security and immunity, serenity, whatever it is that you want to call, whatever best fits there as the translation of itminan qalb. He feels completely at rest, completely itminan, no fear, nothing whatsoever. But if the same child had done something mischievous, had done something wrong, and the father had caught him, and he was walking down the same alley holding on to father's hand. Now how does this child feel? He feels fear inside his heart. Right? At one point he felt that he could take on top of the world. He could mess around with anyone he wanted. And usually I give this example, people don't take it in the wrong way. That if, let's say you're a freshman in high school and you got a brother who's a senior in high school, how you would walk in high school around. I'm not giving you any ideas, but you feel pretty secure. You got a brother who's a senior in the school, right? If you go ahead and pick a fight, which you shouldn't, or if you end up being at a place, you know there's someone who can help you out of there. So you feel pretty secure. But if you do something wrong, if this child does something wrong, and he gets caught, and now he's holding on to the same hand of the father. At first stage, he was in itminan, but in the second situation, he's feeling scared to death. Why? Because father knows what he has done. He's taking him home. He doesn't know what's going to happen to him. Another example, this was an example for the kids. Another example, like a physician, a doctor who has done many surgeries. When it comes to performing a surgery for you and I'm sure it's a routine for him. But when he has to do a surgery of an imam, no concept of imam today, so he has to do a surgery for a president, let's say. The same doctor who has done tons of surgeries, now his hands are shaking. At first he was itminan, he knows what he has studied, he's completely at rest. But because of this individual whom he's performing this surgery upon, right away he feels fearful. Same thing, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. It says, if you do zikr of Allah, your heart will be at itminan. You will feel complete security, immunity, serenity. As long as you keep on following the path that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, the path of obedience. But if you tread down the path of disobedience, right away the zikr of Allah will bring this fear inside you, and it will cause it. So there's no contradiction in reality. Both of them are in Quran, and both of them can be understood through these examples that I just gave you. Salawat bheji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad par. Now there's another example, but it's more so for adults, so I see majority of the crowd is, and it's about marriage. But I mean, how Quran talks about it, gives permission to men, but then at the same time it stops them. So, inshallah, if someone wants, I can explain that to them privately, but let's just move on with that explanation. But there's another explanation of the same concept which we're explaining. Second thing, how we have done injustice to this Quran is by abandoning it. And the example that I had given, how we abandon this Quran, how much Quran plays a role in our lives, on our daily lives. How much do we utilize this Quran? How much do we read this Quran? I'm sure you read or heard this story somewhere that when a grandfather used to read this Quran on his daily basis, his grandson comes to him and says to him that you don't know Arabic, but I see you reading this Quran on daily basis. Why do you read so much? So if you wanted to explain him logically or through the hadith of Prophet, the emphasis that has been given, it would not have mattered to this kid. So he wanted to give him an example. He said to him, take this basket, not a bucket, basket, which had woods in it for the chimney. And it was all dark and black and whatnot, dirty. He said, take this and bring some water for me inside this basket. Even a child knows a basket with all the holes in it cannot bring any water. Yet he still obeys what grandfather said. Goes, comes back, there's no water. It drains right out. He said, try harder. He goes again, he dips it under the water, brings it out, water drains out again. He comes back running, he says, this is useless. I cannot do it. You can't put water in it. He said, try one more time. This time be quick. So he really thinks that there's something that he can do with this basket. So he runs to the lake again, dips it under the water, brings it out, and runs as quick as possible to his grandfather, but sees by the time he gets there, there's still, the water is dripping from it, but there's no water that he was able to fetch or bring back with him. So he's frustrated, and he says to his grandfather, there's no way anyone can bring water into this basket. He said, yes, but look at the basket now. He looked at the basket, it was all clean. He said, this is what you get from reading Quran. Even though you might not understand it, but it still is giving you cleanliness inside your heart. It's purifying your heart. The same way you cannot fit any water into this basket, but by dipping it under the water, you're cleaning it, and look at it now from comparing it to the state that it was in before. Salawat bheji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Prophet said himself, he says, وَقَالَ الرَّسُولُ يَا رَبِّ إِنَّ قَوْمِ اتَّخَذُوا هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ مَهْجُورًا. Oh my Lord, my people, my nation has taken or has abandoned this Quran. If there was no implementation of this ayat, this is Surah Furqan, verse number 30, why would Prophet say such a thing on the Day of Judgment? So nonetheless, we are the subject to whom Prophet is referring to. We are the nation that belongs to the Prophet. So it is us that Prophet is complaining about to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So have we really left this Quran, or have we really abandoned this Quran? This is something that you see, that if Quran is detached from Ahlul Bayt, this same Quran could be something which can mislead people. I'm saying this from the minbar. The Quran, if you detach it from Ahlul Bayt, could be the same Quran which can mislead people. An event which you all have heard in the Battle of Siffin, when Amir al-Mu'mineen is about to embrace the victory and is about to take over Amir Sham. But what do these people do? They raise Quran on top of the spears. And when they raise Quran on top of the spears, these people who are on the sides of Amir al-Mu'mineen, right away they see Quran and they say, well, we're at fault, because we don't want to go into war with someone who is holding on to Quran. And so right away they start withdrawing. And they force Amir al-Mu'mineen into withdrawing from continuous war. And said, no, we cannot fight with these people. They got Qurans in their hands. Imam said, those are just to mislead you. So we see that if Quran is detached from Ahlul Bayt, Quran by itself could be misleading in some places. Salawat bhiji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And the third thing is by focusing on the verses which are talking about qital and killing and submission and so on and so forth. We see that a lot of our counterparts do bring these ayat, and you see these ayat in the media as well these days. And a lot of people are questioning that why are these ayat in Quran which talk about killing and making these people who are infidel submissive and whatnot. Also, there's an answer for that available if you refer to the proper hadith which talks about as to why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has these ayat in Quran. There's connotation to it, there's tafasir to it. I think I've mentioned it before. I'm not going to repeat it over here. But this is why Muslims themselves have done injustice to Quran. The first thing was taking the ayat according to their own understanding. And that was caused through this arrogance that we were talking about. Imam says this little bit of arrogance inside a human's heart, as much arrogance enters the heart of a mu'min, the same amount of piety is relieved from his heart. So the amount of arrogance that is entering is the same amount of aql which is exiting on your part. So we got to be very careful when it comes to this. Why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasizes so much on this one aspect of being humble? Being humble in the life, showing humbleness in every step of the way. Why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is emphasizing so much of this small act? Because a lot of times, by looking at these small things, you're able to tell the whole story behind it. By the way a person holds a cigarette, you can tell that this person is a smoker or not. By the way a geologist will look on the ground. You and I would look on the ground, we will not be able to say anything. But a geologist will look in the ground, by looking at the pollution on top of it, he'll be able to tell you what's beneath it. This is what, by looking at the arrogance of insan, you're able to understand what is behind this individual. So arrogance explains a lot. Arrogance tells the whole story and the illness which is hiding behind this person. Salawat bhiji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Moving on, the second attribute towards this perfect being is when you come across ignorant, qalu salama. That is what ayat of Quran says. وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. And we have that a lot. And we can learn that from the history of our imams as well. That when our second imam made this peace treaty, a lot of people came up to imam and said, Imam, you're making a mistake. You should not do this. You should not do that. Because they failed to understand the decree of imam. This is where you fail to understand the wilayat of imam. What I was talking about earlier, that the recognition, this person who was living with imam only knew imam just like we know imam with ID card information. but he did not believe in the wilayat of Imam. That is why he did not understand why Imam was making that decision. So you and I have to have that understanding and that marifat and that recognition of Imam of our time. Second thing, if you look at it, that it is not an easy thing for our prophets as well. Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam spent 950 years among his people, but there were only 82 people who believed in him. 950 years. He did not get tired. That's patience. That's coming across a whole lot of ignorance and then just saying, Salamun alaikum, peace be on you. I'm going my way, you can go your way. And only coming out with 82 people who believed in him, truly. You and I, when we come across this sort of situation, we get tired. If we fail once, we fail twice, right away we give up on that object. You got to learn from the life of Imams and Ma'asumeen. This is what you learn from them. This is how you implement these messages into your life. That a person like Prophet Nuh, with all the hard work that he has done, and it does not mean that if you are close to someone, you know what we say, that we have a close relation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every ibadah that we perform, what do we make the niyat? We say, qurbatan ilallah, right? That means seeking nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Well, Allah is already close to us. نَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. Closer to this jugular vein, as we always hear, is Allah is that much close. Yeah, that's how much close Allah is. How much are we closer to Him? So every ibadah that we perform, we try to get close as possible to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we understand that it does not mean physical closeness, because if that was the case, Allah is all over the place and we are close to Him. Rather, it means this spiritual closeness that we are seeking with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we stand up for the salat, that means we are seeking spiritual closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If that was the case, that we were physically close to Ma'asumeen, we say because we do the zikr of Ma'asumeen, we are close to them. You know, the Prophet's wives, Prophet Nuh and Prophet Lut, there's no relationship closer than the relationship of husband and a wife. They were very close, and not for a couple of days or weeks or months. No, for years they were with these prophets. They were their wives. But yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Quran, "Udkhul an-nar ma'a ad-dakhilin." You too enter hell. That's where you live. That's where you're going to be. So if it was this qurb makani, that means physical closeness, then these two would not have gone to hell. So if someone today says that I can bury myself next to the Prophet and I can benefit out of it, no, it's not going to benefit you one bit if you did not follow the steps of the Prophet. Just by having physical closeness to the Prophet will not get you anything. Rather, you need to have this spiritual closeness, which is attained through following the steps of this Prophet. Salawat Biji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Second thing, if you don't reply to them in this fashion by saying salam and peace be unto you, and you start arguing with these people who are ignorant, then you become like them. And Amir al-Mu'mineen in Nahj al-Balagha, khutbah number 206, sermon 206, this is what he says. This is when Amir al-Mu'mineen is at Siffin. Who is the enemy? Muawiyah and his people. Imam hears some of his people cursing Muawiyah and his companion. This is what Imam says. He says, "Inni akrahu lakum an takunu sabbabin." It is indeed disliked for me, an action which is disliked action for me, that you be cursing someone else. People said, "Oh Imam, are we not on the right path?" They said, "Yes, we are." Is Muawiyah and his followers are not on the wrong path? Imam said, "Yes, indeed they are." He said, "Then why we can't curse at them?" Imam says, "This is a disliked action from me, that you go ahead and openly curse them." Why? This is Nahj al-Balagha, sermon number 206. He said, وَلَكِنَّكُمْ لَوْ وَصَفْتُمْ عَامَالَهُمْ وَذَكَرْتُمْ حَالَهُمْ. He said, instead of cursing at them, describe their deeds and recount their situation. That would be better mode of speaking to them. He says, Qalu salama. Quran is saying second attribute of Ibadur Rahman is, first is that they're humble. Second is that in their speech, they say peace be unto you and they move along. And you relate that with this khutbah of Amir al-Mu'mineen in Nahj al-Balagha 206. Imam is saying the same exact thing to his biggest enemy. He said, I don't want you to say those things. Because if you mention their good accounts of what they do, their bad deeds, that is enough for them. Because it might be the case when they hear their bad deeds from other people's mouth, they might change their status and there might not be a war at all. We might not go to war with these people at all. So if you want to learn from Amir al-Mu'mineen, Surah Muzammil of Quran, ayat number 10 also says, وَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا يَقُولُونَ. Prophet, show patience as to what these people are saying. وَهْجُرْهُمْ حَجْرًا جَمِيلًا. And avoid them with graciousness. You don't have to go ahead and cause any sort of conflict with these people. So that is the second attribute that is being mentioned over here by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as far as Ibadur Rahman are concerned. Salawat biji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad par. The third attribute, and we'll go through this quickly, which is the ayat that I recited earlier. It says, وَالَّذِينَ يَبِيتُونَ لِرَبِّهِمْ سُجَّدًا وَقِيَامًا. Third attribute towards getting to this perfection and attaining this level of perfection which is being discussed in these ayat of Surah Furqan. I suggested that we go ahead and read these ayat yesterday. I don't know how many people went ahead and read it. I won't ask over here to raise your hands for that. But again, I will suggest that you go ahead and read these ayat. Chapter 25, Surah Furqan, verses 63 onwards. Just read the translation, and inshallah these things will make more sense when you come back here tomorrow. And inshallah tomorrow I will ask how many people actually went ahead and read, and I will get a count of that as well. Salawat biji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Third is, these are the people, yabituna li rabbihim sujjadan wa qiyam. They spend their nights worshipping, performing sajda, and performing qiyam for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now I want your attention over here very quickly. I'll be done inshallah in 10-15 minutes. What does it mean when Allah says that these people are the ones who perform worship all night long? Does that mean they do nothing, they don't sleep at all, and all they're doing is doing ibadat of Allah? I gotta get up in the morning, I got tons of things, I gotta get a good night's sleep. So if I want to become perfect being and join the club of Ibadur Rahman, that's one thing that I can't do. Because Allah is saying the third attribute is that these are people who spend their night sujjadan wa qiyama, performing sajda and standing up in the ibadah. There's a person by the name Abul Hasan Isfahani. He lived in Khurasan, in Mashhad, present day. And he was an alim of his time. He used to go, for those who have gone to the ziyarat of Imam Raza, they know the haram. It was very small back then. Now it's that big that we see. So it was pretty small. So this person used to go and perform salat. And it was he was known for long sajda and long ruku and so on and so forth. So one day it was a winter night and it snows over there. He goes in and stands on the roof. He starts the salat. The person who's the mutawalli of the masjid or the haram of Imam, now the haram is open 24 hours, but back then they used to lock it. He used to close it. Upon his way out, he sees that Sheikh Abul Hasan Isfahani is still worshipping. So he says, well, this is Sheikh, he knows the drill, so he'll lock it himself. What he does, he brings some fire close to him. They didn't have any, portable heaters. So that he brings some fire and brings it close to him so that, it keeps him warm. Because it was a winter night and it was pretty cold and he was praying outside. He said, I left the door open thinking that Sheikh will lock it on his way out whenever he finishes his salat. I did not want to disturb while he was praying. He said, I left. He said, in the morning when I came back for Fajr prayer, because I had to come back early to open the door and set everything up, when I got there, I saw the door was still open. So I was very disappointed that I trusted Sheikh. He would lock the door upon his way out, and he left it open. He said, I was thinking like that, and I came inside. What I see that it snowed that night as well. So it was snowing. He said, I come back and I left Sheikh in the position of ruku. When I came back after 4 or 5 hours, I saw Sheikh was still in the position of ruku. And there was some snow on his back as well. That means he had not moved from that situation all night long. Or at least for those 4 or 5 hours that I was gone for. Sleeping in my home, cozy and whatnot. Sheikh was out there performing the salat. He was still in that form of ruku. So I feared for Sheikh's death. Maybe he was frozen to death or something. He's standing like that. He did not move. But then as soon as I said azan, he finished the salat. He came and he led the namaz. And he was perfectly all right. Not a sign of flu or anything to him. Now I'm not saying that it's a good idea for all of you to go tonight and start worshiping outside on your backyards. That's not what I'm trying to say over here. Because I don't want to get in trouble with the parents tomorrow saying that, Maulana, you gave that idea and all of our kids were worshiping outside on the lawn in this frigid night. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm just showing you that if someone wants to do something and they have strong intentions, they're able to do it. Sheikh, because he was connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he did not care for how cold it was. That cold did not affect his body either. But that's not what is being asked from us either. That when the third attribute of Ibadur Rahman is that they spend their night worshipping and doing the ibadat, Hazrat Salman Farisi radiallahu anhu, when he was asked, Salmanu minna ahl bayt, right? That's what the Prophet said, Salmanu minna ahl bayt. That's what Imam said, that Salman is among us ahl bayt. Salman did not become Salman minna ahl bayt from the very beginning. He went through certain training and then he came out to be Salman minna ahl bayt. How? If you look at his life as well. Once someone asked, or actually Prophet asked, who among you finishes Quran every single day? Who among you spends the night in performance of ibadat? And who among you spends all year long fasting except those days which is haram to fast? Salman comes up and he says, I do. Now when he left, people start saying, oh Prophet, he's lying. Because we've seen him eat during the day. So he did not fast many days. He's lying because he's sleeping all night long. We've seen that too. So he does not perform ibadat all night long. And most of the day he's talking to people, so I don't think he has any time reading Quran. And so when Prophet asks for Salman, Salman comes to Prophet. This is just a shortcut I'm telling you. If we can't do the whole thing, this is the shortcut. So the kids listen along. What does he say? When Prophet said, what are these claims that you're making? Are you true in that? He said, yes. As far as Quran is concerned, you have said yourself that Qul huwallah is 1/3 of Quran. So I read it 3 times along with Surah Fatiha. I have read the whole Quran on daily basis. And then as far as fasting all year long is concerned, Prophet himself has said a person who fasts the first of the month, middle of the month, and the last of the month, it's as if he has fasted for the whole month. So I do that, and I'm considered to be someone who fasts all year long. And the third thing, the person who spends the night in worship, Prophet has said, a person who sleeps after have performed wudu before going to sleep, as if he has spent all of his night in performance of ibadah. So this is the shortcut that you and I can at least adopt that. If not, do the whole thing. Definitely the whole thing would really be something. But if not, let's start from this and we can inshallah build upon it. Salawat biji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So why is it that the night time is being mentioned over here? Night is a time when darkness prevails and no one's around you. You're by yourself. There's no way of showing off. There's no vanity at that time. You're by yourself. And there's no riyakari, as they say it. right? That is why this nightly prayer is there. The importance of nightly prayers. There's so many ahadith in this regard. Inshallah, if I have time, tomorrow I'll mention some of them as well. But why this night time has been mentioned as to one to go ahead and perform this ibadat, along with other benefits of this nightly prayer. You do not really have to wait until midnight to go ahead and perform it. If someone thinks that, how can I wait till midnight? I usually go to sleep. Well, imagine me, I can tell parents easily that nobody goes to sleep before midnight. You think kids are sleeping. You might have put them to bed, but with all the gadgets that they have these days, they're all up. Somehow they manage to sleep 6-7 hours so that they're awake in the morning to go to their schools and whatnot, but they don't fall asleep right away when you turn off the lights and you close the door. They're still awake for a while. Now that the break is coming up, at least this winter break that you have coming up, I'm sure nobody will go to sleep before 12 or at least midnight. Now, I'm not trying to give anyone a bad habit. If you do go to sleep early, even there's something you can do as far as nightly prayers are concerned. But if you do go around midnight, then perform this 8 rakat namaz. Nightly prayer is 11 rakat. Perform the 8 rakat, 2 rakat each, sets of 2 rakat, just like Fajr prayers, with the niyat of nightly prayers, namaz isha, go to sleep. Wake up 5 minutes prior to Fajr time. So Fajr these days is 6:14, 6:15. Wake up at 6:10. Or give yourself a couple of minutes to do wuzu, go to the washroom, and come and perform this 3 rakat salat, 2 rakat called namaz al-shafa, just like you do Fajr prayers. There's no qunut usually. Even if you do it, there's not a problem. And then 1 rakat namaz al-witr. That completes your 11 rak'at of namaz al-shab. At least when you have this break, this winter break, that you're not going to be sleeping very early. But if you do go to sleep early, after Isha prayers, give yourself some time where you've eaten or something, whatnot. Usually you got to come to Majlis. When you go back from Majlis, go ahead and do the same thing and get in the habit of this nightly prayers. You say, why? Just the same way a child inside the womb of the mother, if you tell this child that there's bridges and buildings and monuments and whatnot outside in this world, he's like, I don't care. I got this umbilical cord, I'm just going to be happy with it. They don't know what's going on outside, and they don't understand what's going on outside. They're happy in that little world that they have over there, playing inside this womb of the mother. Just like that, you and I don't know the benefits of it in reality. We are in a bigger womb. We don't know what is it there for us in the hereafter if we perform this nightly prayers. So let it be known, alhamdulillah, I have explained plenty the benefits of it, and you will see it yourself when you start praying it. Salawat bheji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad par. But Allah has kept this night special as well. That's the last thing, inshallah, we'll end with that. He kept this night to be special. And that is why ibadat at night time is emphasized a lot. You see that we have this, the brain has divisions, and the bottom part of the brain stem, there are cells which are called nuclear. And the system is that they run a system called reticular activating system. We'll just abbreviate it to RAS. And what that does is sends signals. It discharges signals into your brain. And it's kind of like this pendulum. It's just moving like this. So it's discharging these signals, and it's in the bottom part of the brain. Those who are doctors, they can correct me if I'm saying anything wrong, or you can confirm it with them after the majlis, not right now. So this system, what happens towards the night time, it starts to slow down. And when it slows down, your ability to speak comes down. Your ability to talk, your ability to stay put with your eyes open comes down. Because the signals is very weak. So you cannot really comprehend it. So that's when it happens, you start falling asleep. And when you get up in the morning, the signal is still weak. And when the signal is weak, That is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want to put so much pressure on you. He said there's only 2 rakat namaz in the morning. If a person says, why can't I pray more than 2 rakat? The reason Allah mentioned only 2 rakat in the morning is because your reticular activating system is still activating. It still is slow in discharging this signal to your brain, and therefore your body movement is very low. Thinking ability is very low. Your speaking ability is very low. So if you start off with this namaz shab, you get activated, and when you go to the wajib namaz, then you will really be able to enjoy the salat. So we'll end with this, but یہ وہ نماز ہے کہ جس کو اگر آپ دیکھیں جب امام حسین ودا ہو رہے ہیں تو امام کیا کہتے ہیں اپنی بہن سے، جو وصیت امام جناب زینب کو کر کے جا رہے ہیں. امام حسین کی بھی وصیت عجیب و غریب ہے. امام کہتے ہیں کہ اے میری بہن، اپنی نماز شب میں مجھے فراموش نہ کرنا. آپ دیکھیے کتنے سخت مرحلے ہیں جن سے جناب زینب کو گزر کے جانا ہے، لیکن امام کو یقین ہے کہ بہن ان سخت مرحلوں کے باوجود نماز شب کو ترک نہیں کرے گی. اللہ اکبر. اللہ، ہم اور آپ ان واجبات کو ہی مشکل سے انجام دے پاتے ہیں، لیکن ان سخت حالات میں کہ جب حالات بھی مناسب نہیں ہیں، جگہ بھی مناسب نہیں ہے، ارے پانی بھی نہیں موجود ہے کہ وضو کر سکیں صحیح سے، لیکن ان حالات کے باوجود امام کو اتنا اعتماد ہے اپنی بہن کے اوپر، امام کہتے ہیں کہ مجھ کو اپنی نماز شب میں فراموش نہ کرنا. آپ دیکھیے کہ یہ جو قافلہ چلا ہے اس کے اوپر مشکلات کتنی آتی گئی ہیں. جب یہ قافلہ کوفے سے نکلا ہے اور شام کی طرف رواں دواں ہے، آسان منزلیں نہیں تھیں. یہ گھرانہ جو کبھی نرغ آدم ہے، یہ گھرانہ جو کبھی غیروں کے سامنے نہیں آیا، آج یہیں اسی گھرانے کی بیویاں دشمنوں کے سامنے بے مخنہ و چادر ہیں. یقیناً یہ سخت مراحل ہیں، کسی عام شخص کے لیے بھی سخت ہوتے، لیکن اہل بیت کے گھر والے کے لیے اور مزید بڑھ کے سخت ہیں. آپ دیکھیے کس طریقے سے مختلف مقامات پہ ان بیویوں نے کس طریقے سے اس امام کے اس مشن کو جاری رکھنے کے لیے اپنے اوپر کس طریقے سے برداشت کیا ہوگا. یقیناً یہ منازل بڑی سخت ہوں گی، لیکن بعض ایسی منزلیں آئیں کہ جس میں یہ بیویاں بھی نہ کہہ پائیں کچھ. آپ مثال دیکھیے کہ اگر کوئی بچی آپ کے سامنے آتی ہے اور آپ سے کسی چیز کا تقاضا کرتی ہے، اگر آپ وہ چیز دینے سے قاصر ہوں تب بھی آپ اس بچی کے ساتھ کس طرح کا برتاؤ کریں گے؟ آپ اس سے اچھے سے پیش آئیں گے. بیٹا ابھی میرے پاس نہیں ہے یہ چیز، میں بعد میں تمہیں یہ چیز دے دوں گا. لیکن یہ ظالم اس طریقے کے تھے کہ جب ننھی سکینہ بالبلا کے بابا کو یاد کرتی تھی یا کبھی پانی کا تقاضا کرتی تھی تو کوئی آ کے سر کے اوپر شفقت سے ہاتھ نہیں رکھتا تھا، بلکہ ادھر سے تعزیانے پڑھتے تھے. جب اس سکینہ نے باپ کے سر کو دیکھا، کیونکہ امام حسین کے سر کے ساتھ یہ حساب تھا کہ کہیں کہیں وہ ایک صندوق میں امام کے سر کو رکھتے تھے، لیکن ان جگہوں پہ جہاں ان کے حامی موجود تھے امام کے سر کو نیزے پہ بلند کر دیا کرتے تھے. اور جیسے ہی سر نیزے پہ ہوتا تھا سکینہ سے رہا نہ جاتا تھا، باپ کے سر کو دیکھتی تھی اور سکینہ گریا کرتی تھی، بابا بابا پکارتی تھی. ارے اس عالم میں اگر کوئی ہوتا تو آ کے سکینہ کو گلے لگاتا، لیکن ان ظالموں سے کوئی بھی امید نہ تھی. یہ الٹا آ کے سکینہ کے اوپر درے برساتے، ارے نیزے برساتے. اتنا کہ ایک وقت ایسا آیا کہ ایک ظالم قریب بڑھتا ہے اور سکینہ سے کہتا ہے کہ اگر خاموش نہ ہوئی تو تازیانہ تم پہ ماروں گا. سکینہ یقیناً ایک بچی ہے، گریا کر رہی ہے، ارے تازیانہ پڑتا ہے. ادھر یہ بچی اس کوفے کے راستے میں شام جاتے ہوئے راہ میں رہ جاتی ہے، لیکن جب امام کا سر نیزے پہ بلند تھا امام نے اپنے آپ کو بھی زمین پہ گرا دیا. اب یہ قافلہ آگے نہیں بڑھ سکتا، اس لیے کہ ابن زیاد کو سر امام حسین یزید تک پہنچانا ہے. لیکن کوئی آئے تو صحیح، اس سر کو حرکت دینے کی کوشش کی. لیکن کوئی بھی سر کو ہلا نہ سکا۔ آئے سید سجاد سے کہا کہ دیکھو کیا ماجرا ہے۔ سید سجاد اتر کے آتے ہیں، جناب زینب آتی ہیں، کیا دیکھا؟ تھوڑی دیر کے لیے سکینہ سے غافل ہوئے، ارے سکینہ غائب ہے، امام کا سر آگے نہیں بڑھ رہا۔ زینب سمجھ گئی کہ امام کی بیٹی، ارے حسین کی ننھی بیٹی اس بازار میں، اس میدان میں پیچھے رہ گئی ہے۔ زینب پیچھے آتی ہے، سکینہ کو صدا دے رہی ہے، ارے سکینہ بیٹا کہاں رہ گئی؟ یہاں تک کہ پہنچتی ہیں ایک مقام پہ، کیا دیکھا کہ ایک مخدومہ، ایک خاتون، با پردہ خاتون ایک سکینہ کو لے کے بیٹھی ہوئی ہے۔ ارے جیسے ہی زینب وہاں پہنچی، آ کے سکینہ کو دیکھا، کہا اے بی بی تمہارا شکریہ، تم نے ہماری بچی کا خیال رکھا، لیکن یہ بچی ہم کو دے دو، ہمارا قافلہ آگے نہیں بڑھ سکتا جب تک ہم اس بچی کو نہ لے جائیں۔ ارے سر حسین زمین پر ہے اور آگے نہیں بڑھ رہا۔ امام جناب زینب سکینہ کو لے لیتی ہیں، لیکن جاتے ہوئے کہتی ہیں کہ اے بی بی اگر تمہاری کوئی خواہش ہو، تم نے ہم پر احسان کیا ہے، تم نے ہم پر احسان کیا ہے، تمہاری کوئی خواہش ہو تو بیان کرو، ہم تمہاری اس خواہش کو پورا کریں گے۔ جب یہ کہا تو فاطمہ الزہرا نے اپنا نقاب ہٹایا، ارے زینب بیٹا میں تیری دکھیاری ماں ہوں، میں کربلا سے لے کے کوفے تک تیرے ساتھ آئی، تیری تمام مشکلات کو دیکھا، ارے اس کے بعد بھی تیرے اوپر مشکلات ہیں، بس آخری جملہ اور زحمت تمام یاد رکھیے گا۔ امام نے کہا تھا اے زینب مجھے اپنی نماز میں فراموش نہ کرنا۔ یہ لوگ جو کہ پانی نہ دیتے تھے تو ان سے کھانے کی بھی کوئی امید نہ تھی۔ جب زینب زندان میں ہے، ایک دفعہ امام سجاد کیا دیکھتے ہیں کہ بی بی زینب آج نماز بیٹھ کے پڑھ رہی ہیں۔ جناب زینب کو بیٹھ کے پڑھتے ہوئے دیکھا تو امام سجاد سے نہ رہا گیا، اے پھوپھی اماں کبھی زندگی میں آپ کو بیٹھ کے نماز پڑھتے ہوئے نہیں دیکھا، ارے کیوں کر بیٹھ کے پڑھ رہی ہیں؟ جواب سنیے گا زینب کا، کہتی ہیں ارے کھانا اتنا کم ملتا ہے کہ بچوں کو بار بار بھوک لگتی ہے، ارے میں اپنے حصے کا کھانا بچا لیتی ہوں تاکہ جب بچے مانگنے آئیں تو ان کو میں کھانا دے سکوں۔ کئی دنوں سے روزے چل رہے ہیں، اتنی کمزوری ہے کہ اب زینب کھڑے ہو کر نماز بھی نہیں پڑھ سکتی۔ الا لعنت اللہ القوم الظالمین وسیعلم الذین ظلموا ای منقلب ینقلبون۔ بار اللہ ہماری اس بات قبول فرما، ہم گناہ گار ہیں، ہمارے گناہوں سے درگزر فرما، ہمیں اہل بیت علیہ الصلوۃ والسلام کے نقش قدم میں چلنے کی توفیق عطا فرما، ہمارے امام کے ظہور میں تعجیل فرما، ہمیں ان کے اعوان و انصار میں شمار کر۔ ربنا تقبل منا انک انت السمیع العلیم۔ ماتم حسین۔ یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین۔
برباد ہوئی میں، آباد ہوئی کرب و بلا، اجڑا مدینہ برباد ہوئی میں، آباد ہوئی کرب و بلا، اجڑا مدینہ برباد ہوئی میں، آباد ہوئی کرب و بلا، اجڑا مدینہ برباد ہوئی میں، آباد ہوئی کرب و بلا، اجڑا مدینہ برباد ہوئی میں، زینب کو نراسا یا محرم کا مہینہ برباد ہوئی میں، آباد ایک دن تھا کہ اس شہر کی کرتی تھی میں شاہی اور آج تباہی اور آج تباہی بے غسل پڑا مور نبوت کا نگینا برباد ہوئی میں آباد ہوئی کرب و بلا اجڑا مدینہ برباد ہوئی میں کس لاش پہ روؤں کس چھوڑوں میں برادر لاشیں ہے بہتر ہدیے ہے کہ رونے کی اجازت بھی ملی نہ برباد ہوئی میں آباد ہوئی کرب و بلا اجڑا مدینہ برباد ہوئی میں اصغر کا گلا بھائی کسر سینہ اکبر سب گوہر و چادر سب گوہر و چادر اس داست میں لوٹا گیا زینب کا خزینہ برباد ہوئی میں آباد ہوئی کرب و بلا اجڑا مدینہ برباد ہوئی میں مائیں بنا پہچان سکی بچوں کے چہرے بکھرے ہوئے چہرے بکھرے ہوئے چہرے اے خون کے دریا میں غریبوں کا سفینہ برباد ہوئی میں آباد ہوئی کرب و بلا اجڑا مدینہ برباد ہوئی میں ایک آگ ہے خیموں میں قیامت کا سما ہے غازی تو کہاں ہے غازی تو کہاں ہے دیکھو تو ردا چھین گیا شمر کا مینہ برباد ہوئی میں آباد ہوئی کرب و بلا اجڑا مدینہ برباد ہوئی میں چادر چھنی در لے لیے اب ظلم نہ ڈھاؤ بابا سے ملاؤ بابا سے ملاؤ نیزے کے تلے بیٹھ کے روتی ہے سکینہ برباد ہوئی میں آباد ہوئی کرب و بلا اجڑا مدینہ برباد ہوئی میں پابندے رسن بھی بازار کھلے سر ہر موڑ پہ پاتھر ہر موڑ پہ پاتھر معصوم یتیموں کا بہا شرک پسینہ برباد